That's very good. Yes, yes, yes. So let me introduce then the second speaker of this session, Julien Guyon from Bloomberg, and he will talk about VIX-constrained martingale-Schrödinger bridges with a long subtitle, which I'm not going to read in order not to waste more of Julien's time.
Thank you, Martin, for the very kind introduction. Thank you, Georges and Marco and Bruno for the invitation to talk. I'm very glad that this tradition of the Rio meetings is still on this year, despite the circumstances. And I think we have had like a very nice lineup of speakers, and I'm enjoying a lot the conference. I'm also extremely glad to present on that subject that is very close to the talk that Jan just gave, because it's indeed very much inspired by ideas by Marco Avellaneda in the second half of the 90s about using entropy, minimum entropy for calibration purposes. And so I think it's a very good fit for this year's meeting that's dedicated and celebrating Marco's birthday. So happy birthday, Marco, if you're listening. It's funny. I actually had questions for Jan, but I hope Jan, you will be in the coffee room after my talk, so I can ask them. So it's indeed, the subject is basically the same as the one in Jan's talk. It's about like building models that are jointly and exactly calibrated to the S&P SMILE and the VIX SMILE, and it's also very close in terms of techniques, because I'm going to solve the issue also using a continuous time martingale optimal transport, but in a slightly different version compared to what Jan just presented. And so it's going to be really based on Schrödinger bridges. So very quickly, you know that volatility indices such as the VIX are not only used as market implied indicators of volatility, but you also have liquid futures and options that trade on the VIX. Okay, and so the very high liquidity of those futures and options requires that financial institutions price, hedge, and risk manage their SPX and VIX options portfolios using models that perfectly fit market prices of both the S&P and VIX futures and options jointly. That's the classical problem of calibrating stochastic volatility models to liquid hedging instruments. And in the case of SPX, you need to include the VIX futures and VIX options as liquid instruments. And since VIX options started trading in 2006 on the CBOE, many researchers and practitioners have tried to build such a joint calibrating model, but could only at best get approximate fits. And so recently, there's been a revival of this question using now exact fits, and in particular with optimal transport techniques. So this problem has often been described as the holy grail of volatility modeling and is known to be a very challenging problem, especially for short maturities. I'll briefly explain why in the introduction here. So this is the SMILE of the S&P, for instance, here maturity 30 days. So what matters most here is the skew, okay? So the slope here in absolute value is very large for the S&P. And this is the SMILE of the VIX, maturity here 28 days. So here you see that it has positive skew, which is well known, but what matters most here is the value of the at the money volatility, which is around 100. So 100 looks like large, okay, it's 100%, so it's really the number compared to, let's say, around 15% for the at the money volatility of the S&P. But actually, I would argue that this 100 value here is actually quite small compared to the value of the slope. So not the value of the implied volatility of the S&P, but the slope. And the reason is the following. If you, so this, of course, is the definition of the at the money skew. So you move the strike by 1%. How do you move the implied volatility? And so the market data is, for S&P, for instance, shows that the at the money skew for short maturity is about minus 1.5. So if you increase the strike by 1%, then you will decrease the implied volatility by 1.5 points. And in all classical stochastic volatility models with one factor, when the maturity goes to 0, this skew has a finite limit, which is simply 1/2 times the spot vol correlation times the vol of vol. Okay? And so if you want this to be equal to minus 1.5, okay, because of course the spot vol correlation cannot go below -1, that means that you need at least 3 for the vol of vol, and 300%. And you see that 300% is much more than the 100% of the market. Okay, so somehow the very large negative skew of short-term S&P options, which in classical continuous stochastic volatility models will imply a very large volatility of volatility, seems inconsistent with the comparatively low levels of VIX implied volatility. That's of course like more complicated in reality because you have like mean reversions that come into play, but that's the basic problem. So one of the first authors to tackle this question was Jim Gavreau. Maybe Jim, you're listening. Hello, in that case. 2008 at the Bachelier Finance Society Congress, and using like a double mean reverting model, he was able to jointly calibrate quite well. So here you see that's the VIX option because it's upward sloping. So the model is in orange, and this is the corresponding graphs for the S&P Smiles. But when you actually zoom, especially for short maturities, you will see that the model predicts, or I mean, the calibrated model produces a VIX smile that's a little bit too high compared to the market, so let's say 10% too high around the money here, and also does not generate enough at the money skew. So absolute value of the slope you see here for short maturities. So the graphs are close, but actually the slopes are not so close. You can easily have like around a 20% difference. Okay, so of course, when you see that, you say, oh, I would like to decrease the volatility of volatility in my model because it will directly decrease the volatility of VIX options. But the problem is that if you decrease the volatility of volatility, you will decrease in absolute value the slope of the S&P skew, which is already too small. Okay, so you see the conflict here. So I have like similar results using a different model. So for instance, the skewed two-factor Bergomi model, or the skewed rough Bergomi model, which I introduced in 2018, and Stefano De Marco also independently introduced at the same time. And it's just basically based on the idea of Bergomi in 2008, where you actually mix two stochastic exponentials. So here it's in the context of rough Bergomi, so that's why you have this power law kernel with Hurst exponent h, and the fact that you have actually you're mixing two stochastic exponentials with a vol nu naught and nu 1 and the lambda, this linear combination parameter allows you to generate some positive VIX skew. So that's why this is interesting. Another recent example is the quadratic Ruff-Haston model suggested by Jim again with Paul Ghislain and Mathieu Rosenbaum. And in all cases, actually, if you're well calibrated to the VIX smile, you will not get enough S&P at the money skew. So let me show you some graphs. So this is for the skewed rough Bergomi. So this is just market data of the first 4 monthly VIX options. Okay, maturities. So you see first 4 maturities. So you see that you can calibrate well to the VIX smile. Okay, so the market is in red and the skewed rough Bergomi model in blue. But even if you use a maximum negative correlation between spot and vol, which is -1, you will not get enough at the money skew for the S&P. Right? That's what you see here. This is the result for the quadratic Ruff-Haston model of Gavreau, Ghislain, and Rosenbaum. Here, when you are, so this is, you see very short maturities for VIX options. You actually see that the only VIX monthly VIX options are this one, where the bid offer is smaller. So indeed, you are within the bid offer, at least for this range of strike. So you're well calibrated to the VIX smile. But actually, even though globally the shape, of course, of the S&P smile is well captured, if you actually zoom, you will see that around, especially even around the money, you will not have enough at the money skew, and that's the kind of same problem. So even though maybe with this introduction of zoom back effect, the quadratic Ruff-Haston model is better at capturing the joint calibration, it still has this issue with the at the money S&P skew. So it's not so surprising that anyway you can't calibrate exactly because it only has 6 parameters. And in a recent paper, I also do numerical experiments that confirm what I just presented. So here in this paper, I'm deriving analytic expansions of the VIX future in Bergomi models. Okay? And in particular, I do numerical experiments. So I use those expansions to calibrate the two-factor Bergomi model, so without positive skew on the VIX, but we just want to calibrate to a global level of the VIX implied volatility, which I call the VIX squared implied volatility. So that's just the volatility of the VIX squared implied by the VIX future. So it's just a global level without looking at any stripe.
Hello, everyone.
Different. So now on the x-axis, it's the maturity in years. So I try to calibrate the two-factor Bergomi model to a term structure of this is the S&P at domain skew, and this is the VIX squared implied volatility on the right. So you see, for instance, with the light blue curve, you can find parameter of the two-factor Bergomi model so that the term structure of the S&P at domain skew is very well calibrated. But then in that case, you see that you have too much VIX squared implied volatility. Otherwise, you can actually calibrate the two-factor Bergomi model to the term structure of VIX squared implied volatility. So that's the one you see here, that's the purple curve, but then you don't have enough at the Monescu in absolute value for the S&P. And the blue curve is when you try to do both at the same time, but you see that it's not possible. Some related works with continuous models on the S&P for this joint calibration problem include the papers by Fook and Saporito, Gut and co-authors. I also here quote Jackie and co-authors on their paper on the VIX futures in the rough Bergomi model. So they say, interestingly, we observe a 20% difference between the vol-of-vol parameter obtained through VIX calibration and the one obtained through S&P. This suggests that the volatility of volatility in the S&P markets is 20% higher when compared to VIX, revealing potential data inconsistencies. Arbitrage question mark. Of course, I mean, there is no, that doesn't mean that there is an arbitrage. It just means that the model or the class of models is not rich enough to be consistent with the market data on S&P and VIX. And of course, there's this work that Jan just presented using joint calibration via using semi-martingale optimal transport, and that's very closely related to the VIX constrained martingale Schrodinger bridges that I will present in 5 minutes. And some other authors, and we see that it's 30 minutes, so short that I have to speed up. The other authors have included jumps in the dynamics, jumps in the S&P, because of course jumps offer extra degrees of freedom to partly decouple the abdominal skew of the S&P and the abdominal VIX implied volatility. In particular, Rama Comte has a nice paper with Thomas Cockholm, but eventually they only get approximate fits and not exact calibration. So let me remind you, maybe in like 5 to 8 minutes, what I presented last year, because it's going to help you understand the VIX Schrodinger bridges, which is basically the continuous time version of what I presented last year at the Rio conference. So this is exact joint calibration via dispersion constraint martingale optimal transport. So it's a completely different approach to what I've presented, the works I've presented so far, in the sense that what I've showed you so far are parametric, maybe jump diffusion models, and then you just optimize on the parameters to try to fit as best as possible both the S&P market data and the VIX market data. Here, instead of postulating this parametric continuous time jump diffusion model, we are going to build a non-parametric discrete time model. So the fact that it's discrete time helps decouple the S&P skew and the VIX implied volatility, and the fact that it's non-parametric allows you to perfectly fit the smiles. And so how does it work? So we are considering a VIX future maturity T1, okay? T2 will be T1 plus 30 days, and we build a joint probability measure on S1, V, and S2. So S1 is the S&P at T1, V is the VIX at T1, and S2 is the S&P at T2, and this joint probability measure is perfectly calibrated to the S&P smile at T1 and T2, and the VIX future and VIX smile at T1. And on top of that, the model satisfies the martingality constraint on the S&P and the consistency condition. So the fact that the VIX is indeed the implied vol of a 30-day lock contract on the S&P. And the model is cast as a solution of a dispersion constraint martingale transport problem, which is solved using the Sinkhorn algorithm. All the details are in this paper published in Risk Magazine this year in April. So again, time T1, VIX future maturity, T2 T1 plus 30 days. And for simplicity, I will assume zero interest rate repo and dividends. And I will denote by mu1 the risk neutral distribution of S1, that basically from the market smile of the S&P at T1. Mu2 will be the same for maturity T2. And mu v denotes the risk neutral distribution of the VIX V at T1. And we simply assume like very mild assumptions, like the price of the lock contract and the VIX squared are finite. Okay, that's, of course, you know that the absence of calendar arbitrage is equivalent to the fact that mu1 and mu2 are in a convex order. So by definition, the VIX squared is simply the price at time T1 of -2 over tau times the lock contract starting at T1 and maturing at T2. Okay, tau with 30 days. And because I don't want to write -2 over tau every time, I will use this notation, capital L, for -2 over tau times the log of x. So in particular, L is decreasing and convex. I will say log, but it's going to be this L. So how do we proceed with martingale optimal transports? That's going to be dispersion constraint. So we're going to consider all the probability measures on S1, V, and S2 with the prescribed marginals for S1, V, and S2. So those are given by the market smiles. And on top of that, of course, because it's the S&P, we're in financial market, so the S has to be a martingale, which in our case, because at time t1 we know S1 and V, remember we only model S1, V, and S2, translates with this equality here, that the conditional expectation of S2 given S1 and V is S1. Okay? So that's the martingality condition. And this is the consistency condition that tells you that the VIX is indeed, so V is indeed the implied volatility of a 30-day log contract on the S&P. So when you build a model in that set P, you are actually exactly solving the joint calibration model. You have an arbitrage-free model that exactly calibrates to the market prices of the S&P and the VIX. And so our strategy is very much inspired by the works of Marco, that Jan also cited, and I have a slide in 1 minute about it, and also by the recent paper by Adrien Demarche and Pierre-Henri Labordère, where they applied it only to the S&P. So we assume that this set calligraphic P here is non-empty, and we try to build an element in this set by fixing a reference probability measure, mu bar, okay, and then look for the measure mu in P that minimizes some distance, and we will take the relative entropy, okay, with respect to mu bar, our reference measure, which is also known as the Kullback-Leibler divergence. Okay, and this is now a strictly convex problem because the relative entropy is strictly convex that can be solved after dualization by using a Sinkorn's fixed point algorithm. So basically, we have our set P. We just want to build one element in P. We pick a reference measure mu bar, and we'll basically compute the mu star that minimizes the distance from mu bar to P. And that's indeed extremely related to Marco's works at the end of the 90s, because minimum relative entropy approach for calibrating purposes was actually pioneered by Marco. So I give here the two paper, and here, compared to his works, we are adding the martingality constraints and the sort of constraints on the VIX options. So very simple reminder on Lagrange multipliers. That's really like known to everybody in this conference, but it's going to make things clearer, I think. So when you want to, let's say, minimize a function's f of x, y to scalars, but given the constraint that another function g of x, y is equal to a constant c, then the classical technique is to introduce the Lagrange multiplier lambda, apply an absence of duality gap result, and then you end up with an inner infimum here in blue that is unconstrained, so easy to compute. And then you have the outer supremum, which is also unconstrained over all the Lagrange multipliers. So that's much easier than the initial problem where we have a constraint in the infimum. So here, of course, what we are doing is that our constraint is not just like with a scalar. So our constraints are marginal distributions, and they are also like the martingality constraint. And sorry, so this is a typo here. That should be here, the consistency condition. And you see that, for instance, for the constraint that S1 follows the marginal distribution mu1 given by the market, the Lagrange multiplier is naturally all the vanilla payoffs U1. Okay, and so you introduce here the Lagrange multipliers in this way here. This is the equivalent Lagrange multipliers for the martingality constraint. So the fact that for any functions delta S of S1 and V, if this expectation here is 0, that exactly means that S2 is equal to the conditional expectation. Sorry, S1 is equal to the conditional expectation of S2 given S1 and V, and that's the equivalent for the consistency condition on the VIX. So the delta L corresponds actually to the delta on the log contract. And so we do exactly as classically with Lagrange multipliers. We start by minimizing okay, the relative entropy over all the probability measures that satisfy the constraints. We remove the constraints, so M1 is just a set of probability measures unconstrained. We have Lagrange multipliers U1 for the marginal distribution on the S&P at time T1, UV for the VIX smile at T1, U2 for the S&P smile at T2, and this is the martingale-T condition. So this is actually what I write delta SS, S1V, and S2. It's actually just this product, delta S times S2 minus S1, and for the other one, it's just delta L times the log contract minus V squared. So that's what this shorthand notation is for. And so those are all my 5 Lagrange multipliers, if you want. And then absent the duality gap, okay, we are actually, this boils down to computing this inner infimum here and then the outer supremum. And there is a remarkable fact, which is that when we use the relative entropy, the inner infimum can be exactly computed. Okay, it's actually minus the log of the expectation under the reference measure of the exponential of x. X is this red random variable here. And on top of that, we know that the infimum is exactly attained at mu bar x, which is defined by its Radon-Nikodym derivative with respect to mu bar, is just Gibbs types, right? It's just the exponential of x renormalized. Okay, and that's why we like and chose the relative entropy as a distance. And so you see that in the end, what we have is we started from this minimizing the distance problem here, and actually by duality, this is the same as maximizing this function psi of u, where now the u is just unconstrained. They are my Lagrange multipliers. And so it's actually easy. You simply cancel the gradient of psi in order to get a u star that maximizes the function psi here. And most importantly, you know that the infimum, the original infimum, is reached at mu star, which is defined by its Radon-Nikodym derivative with respect to mu bar, as I just described. Okay, so numerical experiments that I presented last year. I have to speed up. Let me show you just that you have like very nice calibration to the smile of S1 here, S2, and V here. And most importantly, you need to check that the martingale-T condition is exactly calibrated. That's exactly the case. Here it's 1 to the power minus 15. So actually S is exactly a martingale here. And V is also exactly the implied volatility of the 30-day log contract, because that's what this graph is showing you. Also importantly, the model is not weird in any way. For instance, the local VIX that you can define like this is plot on the right, and is quite classic. And also those are the conditional distribution of S2 given S1 and V for different values of S1 and V, and they're quite classical. So nothing weird about that model. So let me maybe in the last 3 minutes show you how it works in continuous time with those VIX constrained martingale-Schrödinger bridges. Actually, the idea is exactly the same, but instead of starting with a reference measure that is in discrete time, you start with a reference measure that is a particular stochastic volatility model. So P0 will denote the distribution of S and A in this particular stochastic volatility model that I show here. And then we are interested in all the probability measures, P, so in continuous time, right? It's on S and A, such that S1 follows the marginal distribution given by the market. So we're in continuous time, but we calibrate, okay, the smiles at discrete times, which is still again T1 and T2 for the S&P, and T1 for the VIX. Of course, we need S to be a P martingale, okay? And you see here, we now do not need to introduce a new random variable for the VIX, because the VIX squared is this conditional expectation, right, already in our model. And so we are going to look for a measure P, in that set calligraphic P, that minimizes the relative entropy with respect to the reference measure P0, with respect to the stochastic volatility model. So that's, again, very inspired by the work by Marco, and also by a recent paper by Pierre-Henri Labordère, where he applies this to the calibration to S&P smile. And that very closely follows the construction of Schrödinger bridges. So maybe instead of going into the details of the VIX, let me just actually show you how a simple Schrödinger bridge works. So initially, Schrödinger was looking at a gas that's in equilibrium, but assume that at time t1, actually you observe a density of gas particles that is far from its equilibrium. It's very unlikely, but it has a non-zero probability. And then the question was, what is the most likely scenario between time 0 and time 1 to arrive at this very unlikely distribution of the gas particles, of the molecules? And actually, due to Sanoff theorem, which basically gives you the rate function of the large deviation principle for the empirical measures, you see that corresponds to actually minimizing the relative entropy with respect to the reference measure, which was just like the Wiener measure, if you want, for the initial problem by the stationary Wiener measure for the problem by Schrödinger. And so this interpretation is really due to Hans Vollmer that is presented in the École d'études de probabilité de Saint-Flour in '88. And how does it work? You see that we want to minimize, so that's a simple problem here, you see, where I start with an x, which is just a Brownian motion, and I want to see what is the closest distribution in the space of path, such that at time t1, the distribution is actually mu1. Okay, mu1, of course, the thing here is that mu1 can be anything, and it does not correspond to the distribution of the Brownian motion W0 at time t1. Okay, so we are actually minimizing the distance between P and P0, P0 here being the Wiener measure. And again, we introduce this Lagrange multiplier U1. Absent a duality gap, we get this sup of inf. And again, we recall the remarkable fact about the inner infimum that can be computed exactly, and the infimum is reached at this P star that's defined by the Radon-Nikodym derivative here. So eventually what you have is that the D, the initial problem, is actually equal to P, which is some dual, here it's called, I will use P for primal, but it's the dual problem of D, and which is sup over all the Lagrange multipliers, which are the payoff U1 of this difference here between the expectation of, so that the market price of U1, if you want, and minus the log of the expectation under the reference measure of the exponential of U1 of x1. Okay, and so you have to maximize this over U1. And if you assume that P is finite and that the sup is reached at U1 star, then you know that actually the model that realizes the minimal distance is actually P star defined by this Radon-Nikodym derivative. Here I take a renormalization equal to 1, which you can always do by a cache adjustment. And then it's very easy because you see, you just apply Gersanoff theorem. Basically, MT is just the Radon-Nikodym derivative. Okay, you look at the time small t value of it, which is just the conditional expectation. Of course, it's just the price of an option. We know that it satisfies the heat equation with the terminal condition. And by Gersanoff, you get that W star is actually a Brownian motion under P star. And when you write the dynamics under P star, you see that you get X, of course, does not change the volatility. It's by Gersanoff, we know that equivalent measure, probability measure will not change the volatility and correlations of the path, but it changes the drift, and the drift is explicit when you know the U star, which is given by the U1 star that maximizes here, and again, that you can get by solving this PDE. So what you get is actually a Brownian motion with drift, and the drift is explicitly known. And in practice, we will not use just U1 of x1, but we will replace it by a finite sum of call options. And as actually Jan mentioned, so that's also a very similar result with Jan's talk, is that the gradient of this function that we have to maximize here is simply the vector of differences between model and market call prices. And so that's numerically very easy to check, to compute. I will just show you, I will just show you numerical results in 1 minute if you allow me. Sorry. So this is an example where I actually generate market data using a lambda Seiberg model like here. So I say I use nu, which is 40% to generate market data, but I actually take a reference model where the nu, the vol is 50%. So here I use zero correlation, so that's why we have like a symmetric smiles. So actually the reference model is in black, and the model generated market data is in red, and you see that by modifying the drift, so I keep my 50% vol-of-vol, but I modify the drift of my stochastic volatility model, I will actually be able to calibrate exactly to the S&P SMILE and also to the VIX SMILE. Those are the corresponding delta L and delta S. This is an example that makes more financial sense, in the sense that we have like a negative correlation between spot and vol, as is shown in equity markets. And you see that actually the calibrated model, which is in blue, is also able to recover all the prices of the S&P and VIX options. But in some sense, here you see I don't have enough Adomescu of the S&P around the money in my reference model, but I also don't have enough VIX implied volatility. So by just having more vol-of-vol, I will have more skew, which is what I want, and I will have also more VIX implied volatility, which is what I want. So actually a better, and that's my final example, a better example that is more in line with the difficulties that we face when we look at market data is this one, where I don't have enough skew in my reference model on the S&P, but I have too much implied volatility of the VIX, and even in that case, the Schrödinger bridge can actually fit the S&P and the VIX SMILE exactly. So maybe, and that's really my last slide. Sorry, so that's here because I wanted, I skipped that part, but you at least need to see that one. So when you are applying the Schrödinger bridge to the stochastic volatility model, what you get is, of course, there is no change in the drift of the spot because we require the spot, the S&P, to be a martingale, but there is a change so only in the drift of the stochastic volatility, and the change is explicit. So the extra drift is explicit as a function of U star being the U that maximizes this problem here, where the U that you see here in the problem is solution to Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman PD that you see here, that first you solve between T1 and T2. Then you have something that you need to do at T1 because of to be able to compute the VIX actually at time T1. And then same PDE with new terminal condition between 0 and T1. And just I'm telling you here to finish, why is it that we have, so we've seen before that we had the heat equation. Here we don't have the heat equation because actually the martingality constraint on the S&P exactly takes the form of a stochastic control problem. And because it's a stochastic control problem, the value function will be described by a nonlinear PDE, which is the Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman PDE, and that's why we have this here, this nonlinearity, and the corresponding drift that is in red here can also read like this, and that's going to be my final sentence. It's quite interesting that it's actually path dependent. It's path dependent in a very simple way. Between T1 and T2, the drift of the stochastic volatility will depend on just the past values of S and A at time 1. Sorry, I've been over time. Thank you for your attention, and happy birthday, Marco. And I wish you, Marco, actually a lot of entropy for your birthday. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Julien. So there is one question that came in. I think we can do this before the break. So Temu Penan is asking, the use of Lagrange multipliers requires some kind of constraint qualifications like Slater conditions. Were you able to verify those in your case?
No, so offered good question. So indeed, there are still like quite many theoretical questions that have to be resolved here. Yeah, so I don't have now proof of, for instance, the full results and like including, for instance, the conditions for the use of Lagrange multipliers, and also, for instance, when what is called the dual maximizers is actually attained, and also for the absence of duality gap is just an application of the Rockefeller-Fenscher theorem. So that's fine, but yeah, there are still theoretical questions to be wondered. But I think that Yeah, I'm not sure about the Slade conditions. I think that probably the Rockefeller-Fencher theorem applies in that case where the Lagrange multipliers are just those payoffs and functions of S1.
Okay, so maybe I suggest to move that discussion to the coffee
Absolutely.
break.
I'm happy to discuss with
And
Timmy
also,
about
I
that.
think you answered already Martino Grasselli's question. How did you prove the absence of duality gap when you invert sup and inf? I think you said something very briefly about
Rockefeller-Fencher theorem. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It's really in the same spirit as in the papers by Pierre-Henri Labordère and also the paper by Jan and co-authors. So that's really same argument.
Okay, maybe one question of curiosity from myself. So, I mean, you always start by picking a reference measure and then doing something. How do the results depend on your choice of reference measure?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Martin. Thanks for asking. Of course, it depends a lot. And in particular here, in the case of Schrödinger bridges, you see the impact of the reference measure is, you clearly see that it's important because you are only minimizing the relative entropy with respect to the reference measure, you are not going to change the volatility coefficients, right? And the correlation. So that means that you are actually only considering models with a specific vol of vol, for instance, which will be this sigma of AT, and that can be too many constraints actually, in the sense that actually I don't have to tie my hands by actually choosing a sigma of AT, and in that sense that's why the results by Jan, Greg, Ivan, and Yishi are more general in the sense that they allow themselves to change the volatility and correlation coefficients. So to answer your questions, yes, the choice of a reference measure is important. Actually, if you don't pick the right reference measure, it can be that you will not be able to, by modifying the drift of the stochastic volatility, to jointly calibrate. And I'm guessing that's what's happening now in the cases of market data where I cannot exactly calibrate. It's probably because I don't start from the right reference measure. But in some sense, there are more, instead of minimizing the entropy, you can minimize like more general convex cost functions that will allow you to actually explore more stochastic volatility models.
Okay, so at this point, I think we can thank both Jan and Julien. I see there's a whole discussion going on between Martino, Teemu, Georges. So Julien, I think you should join them in the breakout room and sort out some of these issues. So thanks a lot again, and then see you again in around 20 minutes. And I think, Julien, you're the next moderator.
Correct. See you soon.
Okay, so then, bye-bye, everyone.